The laughter that echoed in the park that afternoon was anything but pleasant. It was shrill, cutting the kind of laugh that belonged to someone cornering another. Near the swings, two twin girls with blonde hair tied high clung tightly to each other's hands. Their backs were pressed against a steel pole, eyes wide with alarm as an older boy closed in, his hand ready to shove. Fall into the sand. Stop pretending. The boy growled, yanking hard at the sketchbook in the younger girl's grip. Before the next blow could land, a figure stepped into the space between them. Ryan Carter, faded navy t-shirt, hands still stained with machine grease, stood tall, his gaze hard as steel. "Step back," he said, voice calm but leaving no room for negotiation. The boy froze, chin tilted in defiance. They started it first. Ryan didn't blink. "My name's Ryan. Try telling the truth." The two girls stayed glued to each other, cheeks flushed, breath trembling. The older one, Emily, clutched her sister Grace's shoulder, hiding the torn sketchbook behind her back. Ryan crouched down to meet their eyes. "Are you all right? Did he hurt you anywhere?" Emily shook her head, her voice faint as a breeze. "He ripped my sister's drawing." Grace hesitated, then handed Ryan the sketchbook, as if offering a broken treasure. The torn page revealed a drawing of a red fox, folded down the middle. Ryan brushed away the sand and smoothed the paper. "It's beautiful," he said honestly. "No one has the right to turn your work into trash." The boy sneered. "My dad owns half this town." Ryan stood, giving the sketchbook back to Grace. "Then he can buy you a course in manners. Apologize." Silence stretched. Some parents nearby began glancing over. The boy's friends stepped back, at last. He muttered, "Sorry," and stomped off, kicking a stone toward the basketball court. "Thank you," Emily whispered. "Always," Ryan replied. "I've got a daughter too. If anyone ever bullied her, I'd hope an adult would step in." A woman's voice rang out, firm but edged with worry. "Emily." Grace. From the lawn, a woman in a cream blazer and low heels hurried over. Her brown hair was neatly pinned, her eyes scanning the scene in seconds, the torn page, the boy walking away. Ryan's stance shielding her daughters. "I'm Claire Whitmore," she said, voice both grateful and wary. "And you just made an enemy no one wants to face." Ryan's jaw tightened. "I only did what was right." Claire glanced toward the basketball court. "That boy is Victor Hale's son. He strikes back openly and quietly." She exhaled, her eyes softening as she looked at her girls. "Thank you for helping them." Grace tugged at Ryan's hand, timid but insistent. Will you come to the school art fair?" Ryan smiled. "If the school allows guests." "I'll be there." Claire's phone buzzed. A name flashed on the screen, and her face briefly hardened. Then she turned to her girls. "Time to go. Say thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ryan," the two chorused. Ryan watched as they climbed into a sleek black SUV. Grace clutched the sketchbook tightly, as though afraid the wind might steal it away again. The car door shut, and in the reflection on the glass, Ryan saw himself tired eyes, grease-stained hands, a faint scar across his temple, traces he had never tried to hide. He told himself this was just a simple act of kindness. Everything would be fine. But when a matte black sedan rolled slowly past the park's exit, its windows dark, his chest tightened. The phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Mr. Carter." A stern, female voice came through. "This is Detective Morgan. We need to talk about the park incident." And a man named Victor Hale. Ryan stepped out from the trees, pressing the phone close. "What is it?" Hale doesn't let things go. When someone touches his family, he looks for weakness. "Business, your home, even custody rights." Ryan's voice turned rough. "I have a 7-year-old daughter." "Sophie." "Then listen to me," Morgan said. "If you notice strange cars, unusual questions, or get a call involving Child Protective Services, contact me immediately. Don't handle it alone." When the call ended, the sunset cast the park in red. Ryan stood still, telling himself this was just a simple good deed. Yet the lengthening shadows warned that the price ahead would not be small. That night, Brookhaven was unusually quiet. Windows along Main Street went dark one after another, leaving only a few dim streetlights casting yellow pools onto the sidewalks. Ryan sat on the wooden chair in front of his garage, a beer can in hand, his eyes fixed on the rusty swing set in the small park across the street. The scene from that afternoon kept replaying in his mind. The twin girls pressed against the steel pole, the sketchbook torn from their hands, the shrill laugh of a wealthy boy. He had stepped in just in time. But the memory tugged at an old wound Ryan had never stopped regretting. A year ago, Sophie had come home with tear-streaked eyes, hair in tangles, her sweater stained with mud. She had run into his arms, choking on sobs. "Dad, today they pushed me down. They pulled my hair. No one helped me." Ryan remembered the feeling with painful clarity. His chest clenched as if crushed in a vice. But he had been late, stuck at the garage with a rush job. By the time he got to the school, the yard was empty. All he could do was hold his daughter and apologize over and over. That guilt followed him every night, carving into his heart, making him swear to himself, if there was ever a next time, he would never let Sophie or any child endure that alone. That was why, when he saw Emily and Grace that afternoon, he hadn't thought. He had only acted. The phone buzzed on the table, pulling him from the memory. "Unknown number," Ryan picked up. "Mr. Carter," a woman's voice, firm but composed. "Yes, this is Detective Morgan. We need to talk about what happened at the park." And a man named Victor Hale. At that name, Ryan sat up straight. "What's going on?" Hale doesn't let it go when someone crosses his family. He finds the weak spot, and he strikes. "Your work, your home, even custody rights." Ryan's voice roughened. "I've got a 7-year-old daughter. Sophie, I know." Morgan paused. "Listen carefully. If you see an unfamiliar car near your home or garage, if a stranger asks too many detailed questions, or if you receive a call involving Child Protective Services, call me immediately. Don't try to handle it alone." Ryan gripped the phone tighter. He could go that far, just for something at a park? With Hale, any excuse is enough. "I've seen him cost a man custody of his kids for daring to blow the whistle." That's how he breeds fear. The call ended, leaving only the long, hollow tone in Ryan's ear. He sat in silence for a long while, the beer beside him gone flat. In his mind, Sophie's face surfaced again, sitting at her desk, head bent over a coloring book, her young eyes still carrying the trust that her father could protect the whole world. He told himself, no one is allowed to take that away. Not Victor. Not anyone. The next morning, as Ryan rolled up the garage door, a strange unease hit him. The familiar street now carried a sharper edge. Across the corner, a black sedan sat idling, its engine humming quietly, its windows far too dark. Ryan acted as if he hadn't noticed. He bent over his appointment book, but through the corner of his eye, he noted the license plate. The first client called to cancel. "Sorry, I had my car fixed elsewhere," the man said hurriedly. The second reported a family emergency. By the third, Ryan began to feel the tug of invisible strings. These were longtime customers, rarely canceling last minute yet today. They all suddenly had urgent reasons. He kept working, wiping his hands on a rag, but the weight in his chest grew heavier. By midday, a man walked in, a stranger, dressed far too neatly for someone bringing in an old, beat-up car. He glanced around the garage, asking more than he should. "How long have you been here? Does anyone else hold the keys? What time do you usually close?" Ryan stopped and stared straight into the man's eyes. "Are you here to fix your car or run an investigation?" The man laughed awkwardly, retreating quickly, leaving behind the incongruous scent of expensive cologne among the smell of oil and metal. Ryan stepped to the door. The black sedan was still there, motionless, like a predator lying in wait. He inhaled deeply, the rag clenched in his fist. A part of him wanted to march over and knock on that darkened glass. But Detective Morgan's words echoed in his head. "Don't handle it alone." Ryan returned inside, pulling the garage door lower than usual. In the clang of steel, he understood. Morgan's warning was no hypothetical. The battle had begun, and its target was not only him, it was Sophie. That afternoon, Brookhaven was washed in pale sunlight, slipping through the old glass panes of the garage. Ryan was bent under a car, hands smeared with grease. When a soft knock came at the glass door, he slid out and stood up, Claire Whitmore was outside, her light gray blazer striking against the dusty backdrop. In her hand was a small paper bag. Ryan opened the door, surprised. "You came here. I brought coffee and sandwiches," Claire said, setting the bag on the counter. "And to apologize. At the park, I was a bit harsh." Ryan pulled off his gloves and wiped them on a rag. "You were protecting your children. I understand." The scent of strong roasted coffee spread, softening the garage's smell of oil. He took a cup, sipped, the warmth touching his parched throat. Claire stood still for a moment, then spoke plainly. "Victor Hale has been trying to take over Whitmore Industries for months. He's bribed employees, pressured banks, and spread rumors about me. What happened at the park gave him another excuse. Now you and I are both in his sights." Ryan leaned on the counter, eyes fixed on her. "You mean, just because I defended kids, he'll come after me? With Victor, any excuse is enough. He always targets weakness. With me, it's the company, the board of directors. With you—" Claire paused, lowering her voice. "It's Sophie." The name froze Ryan in place. He remembered what Detective Morgan had said the night before, about Hale using any means to attack custody. Claire went on. "He has enough money and power to fabricate a story. An anonymous complaint, a few false witnesses, a fabricated allegation. That's all it takes for Child Protective Services to knock on your door, and you'd spend months, even years, trying to prove the truth." Ryan clenched the rag in his hand. "He wants me scared enough to back off, wants to make me an example to everyone." "Exactly." Claire's gaze sharpened. "If you retreat, those still trying to stand with me at the company will fall silent too. That's how he rules, by sowing fear until he swallows everything." A heavy silence passed. The ceiling fan whirred overhead, blending with the faint hum of engines outside. Ryan lifted his head. "I don't have much, but Sophie is everything. If he even thinks about touching her—" His voice cracked, throat tightening. "I'll fight to the end." Claire studied him for a long moment, her usual coldness softening slightly. "I believe you, but you need to understand, this isn't about the park anymore. This is a war, and he will play as dirty as it gets." Ryan nodded slowly, his eyes holding back weariness. "I know. That day, I only did what was right, but now—" He glanced out toward the street, where the evening light lay over still rooftops. "I see what he truly wants to take isn't just your company, it's my daughter." Claire placed a business card on the counter. "If there's any sign, strangers, calls, a car parked too long, call me first. And call Detective Morgan. Don't face this alone." Ryan looked at the card. Claire Whitmore, CEO, printed boldly across it, lying next to an oil-stained wrench. Two worlds had collided right there on the worn wooden counter. He slipped it into his wallet, then lowered the garage door another notch. In the clang of metal shutting, Ryan knew one thing with certainty. The danger had gone far beyond himself. It was aimed straight at Sophie, and he would not let anyone take her away. Brookhaven Elementary was unusually lively on that Saturday morning. Out on the lawn, cars lined up in a row. Inside, the gymnasium was decorated with ribbons and balloons of every color. The air carried the faint mix of glue, colored paper, and sweet cookies. Ryan walked in with Sophie. She wore a light blue dress, her small hand clinging tightly to his. Her eyes lit up at the sight of long tables draped in white cloth, filled with drawings, lopsided clay figures, and paper models made by the students. "Look, Dad," Sophie whispered, tugging him toward a corner. There, Emily and Grace were standing, and the twins spotted him at once. "Mr. Ryan," Emily called out, running over with Grace in tow. They both clung to his arm, as if they had known him forever. "Sophie, come here. We've got our own table." Ryan laughed. "Bending down. You two set up a whole booth like this." Grace nodded, handing Sophie a brand new box of crayons. "So you can draw with us." Sophie smiled, the worry that had clouded her little face for days vanishing at last. Ryan exhaled, feeling a small measure of relief. The crowd of parents and children gradually filled the gym. Laughter, footsteps, and kids bickering over colors blended together into a chaotic symphony. Ryan stood aside, watching Sophie draw with Emily and Grace. In that moment, he felt peace, But then the atmosphere shifted. The back door opened. Victor Hale walked in tall, wearing a perfectly tailored gray suit. Two men in black trailed closely behind him. The crowd stilled slightly, some parents whispering his name. Victor's eyes swept across the room and landed directly on Ryan. A thin smile spread, one that never reached his eyes. Victor's voice cut clear through the noise. The hero of the park. Ryan turned, standing tall, unflinching. Sophie looked up, confusion in her eyes, but he squeezed her hand gently in reassurance. Victor advanced, his bodyguards clearing a path. Do you think you've accomplished something, humiliating my son in front of half the town? You'll pay for that! His words sliced the festive air like a blade. Parents stopped moving, some quietly edging back. Ryan kept his tone steady, his gaze locked. If your boy learned that day not to bully others, then I'd call it a good day. A brief silence. Victor's smile faltered. His eyes darkened. He stepped closer, lowering his voice so only Ryan could hear. You're just a nameless mechanic. I can break you anytime your work, your home, your daughter. Before Ryan could respond, a woman's voice rang out, sharp as glass. Enough, Victor. Claire appeared from behind. In a forest green blazer, her hair pulled back high, she strode quickly forward, planting herself between them. This is a children's art fair, Claire said firmly. If you want to flaunt your power, pick another place. Victor smirked. Claire, you still like to collect strays, don't you? But remind this mechanic for me standing against me has never been a wise decision. Claire didn't flinch. If you utter one more threat here, I'll call the press. They'll love reporting that Victor Hale harassed a single father and 3 kids at an elementary school. Let's see how fast that makes your successful businessman image evaporate. The crowd stirred. Some parents pulled out their phones. Victor saw the attention turning toward him. The false smile returned, but his eyes stayed cold. We'll meet again, Carter, he murmured, then turned on his heel. His bodyguards followed, and the 3 figures slipped out through the back door. The room slowly returned to motion. Though the weight lingered, Claire turned, meeting Ryan's gaze. Her eyes carried both gratitude and warning. You saw it, Claire said quietly. You're already in this fight, and Victor never plays fair. Ryan swallowed hard, tightening his hold on Sophie, pulling her closer. I know, he said, voice low, and I won't let him touch her. Claire nodded, but her eyes stayed taut as a drawn string. Be ready. This is only the opening act. Ryan stood still for a moment, watching Sophie hold hands with Emily and Grace, the 3 girls giggling at the table of drawings. In that colorful scene, their innocence felt like a fragile wall holding back the weight of the world. He understood then, Victor would not stop, and the real battle had only just begun. On Monday morning, the phone in the garage rang non-stop. Ryan pulled off his gloves, wedged the receiver between his shoulder and ear, while still bent over the engine. Carter's garage. On the other end, a man's hesitant voice. I'm sorry. I have to cancel the appointment. My car. I already took it somewhere else. Ryan frowned. This was the 3rd client in 2 days. All were regulars. None had ever switched garages before. He jotted it down, then tossed the pen aside. An old beer can on the desk rattled at the impact. That afternoon, just as Ryan was about to sign a contract to service a fleet of trucks for the local transport company work that would cover next month's rent, the phone rang. We're sorry. The manager's voice sounded strained. Some information came up about your garage. The board decided to go with another partner. Ryan gripped the receiver. What information? My garage has been clean and transparent for years. Just rumors. The man said quickly, then hung up. The long dial tone filled the silent room. Ryan stood still, feeling as if the ground had just been pulled out from under him. That night, the house phone rang. Sophie was asleep, her breathing steady in the next room. Ryan picked up. Mr. Carter, a woman's voice, formal and distant. We're calling from Sophie's school. There has been an anonymous complaint stating that she often comes to class tired, unfocused, and showing signs of neglect at home. Ryan's blood turned cold. What? Sophie is healthy, and I care for her every day. Who told you that? Anonymous, the woman replied. her tone as flat as if reading from a script. We are required to note it and monitor. If further evidence arises, we'll escalate to Child Protective Services. Ryan clenched the receiver, his fingers numb. That's slander. Sophie is everything to me. We'll verify. Goodbye, sir. The line went dead, leaving Ryan frozen in the dark. He looked toward Sophie's door, saw her curled around her teddy bear, fast asleep, unaware of the outside world threatening to tear her from her father's arms. The next day, as Ryan rolled up the garage door, he spotted a black SUV parked across the street. Its windows were pitch dark, no temporary plate, engine humming low. It sat there all morning, silent as a predator lying in wait. Ryan tried to ignore it, bent over his work, but the third time he glanced up, the SUV was still there, two figures motionless inside. He flung down the rag and strode straight to the curb. His footsteps rang sharp, drawing the eyes of passers-by. Ryan stopped at the hood, arms folded, staring directly into the dark glass. Say what you want. No reply. The engine growled. The SUV backed away slowly, then turned and vanished at the corner. Ryan stood in the street, shoulders taut. He knew the message he had sent. I see you. I am not afraid. But inside, unease gnawed. If Victor had started his games, this was only the prelude. That afternoon, the garage door swung open again. Claire stepped in, pulling off her sunglasses, fatigue etched across her face. You too, she asked, her voice low. Ryan wiped his hands, nodded. Regulars canceling, a big contract gone, the school calling about Sophie being neglected. Someone's making things up. Claire sat on the wooden chair by the counter, exhaling. Victor's hitting my company too. 2 major investors just pulled out, and the press is buzzing that I've lost control. And she stopped, eyes flashing anger. He's even spreading rumors about us, that you're my so-called hired protector. Ryan's jaw tightened. He wants to divide us, turn us into a joke, and he wants us afraid, Claire said, her tone sharp as a blade. But I don't intend to let him swallow my company. And you, I know you won't let him take Sophie. Ryan stayed silent a moment, eyes fixed on the street. The evening light stretched long, gold spilling across the garage windows, reflecting his tense face. Claire, he said slowly, I don't know where this fight will lead us, but if he dares touch my daughter... Ryan's fist tightened, veins rising. I'll fight to the very end. Claire met his gaze, worry mixed with a flicker of trust. Good. Since that day in the park, we've been on the same side, and Victor Hale has never played fair. Outside, Brookhaven's streets bustled on, as if no one noticed the quiet war tightening its grip. But Ryan knew the storm had already reached his doorstep, and this time, he couldn't just stand by. A brief rain shower swept over Brookhaven that night, leaving puddles glistening under the streetlights. Ryan's garage closed earlier than usual. He sat at the wooden counter, staring at a list of regular clients now scarred with red slashes, canceled appointments. Sophie sat in the corner, focused on coloring a red fox with her new pencils, her hair falling over her forehead. The glass door swung open. Claire stepped in, speckled with rain, holding a thick folder. Her eyes no longer carried their usual composure. Instead, they held a cold determination. We can't stay on the defensive anymore, Claire said, laying the folder on the counter. If we want to survive, we have to strike back. Ryan looked up, waiting silently. Victor built his empire on fraud. Claire continued firmly. Money laundering, bribery, and embezzlement from investment funds. I have leads, but I need more evidence. If we gather enough and hand it to the press or federal agents, he won't have the power to come after us. Ryan leaned back in his chair, anger and unease twisting inside him. You think you can topple him with just paperwork? Paperwork and witnesses, Claire corrected. I have access to certain internal files, but I can't do this alone. I need someone I can trust, someone to protect, to connect with the people out there. Their eyes locked. Ryan drew a deep breath. For weeks, all he had wanted was to keep Sophie safe. But every move Victor made had aimed directly at that. There was nowhere left to hide. All right, he said hoarsely. I'm in, partly because I'm furious at what he's done, but more than that. He glanced at Sophie, still coloring, her small shoulders swaying as she hummed softly. "But I won't let her live in fear forever." Claire nodded slowly, as if she had been waiting for that answer. "Good. I'll handle the company's data. What about you? Do you have anyone you can trust?" Ryan gave a brief, joyless smile. "I served in the military. A few brothers still owe me favors, and a former cop who vouched for me when I opened this garage. If we need testimony, recordings, they'll step up." The following days, they slipped into a new rhythm. By day, Ryan kept fixing cars, pretending life was normal. But once the garage closed, he pulled out his phone to reach faces from the past. A former sergeant agreed to gather testimony from old employees Victor had ruined. A retired police officer provided old recordings of bribes that had been buried. Late at night, Ryan drove through empty streets, meeting witnesses in small cafes or dim bars. He listened, took notes, traded information, each detail another brick in the wall being built against Victor's empire. Meanwhile, Claire quietly used her CEO access. The office computer glowed late into the night as she opened files, extracted invoices, wire transfers, and bank ledgers. Sometimes her hands trembled, knowing each click risked being detected by Victor. But she pressed on. One evening, meeting Ryan at the garage, Claire set a USB drive on the table. "Wire transfers through a shell company in Belize. If the press gets this," Ryan nodded, "it'll be the noose around his neck." But Victor was not one to sit still. One night, after meeting an old witness, Ryan drove Claire home. The suburban road was dark, streetlights spread far apart, the headlights carving through puddles. As they turned a bend, a black sedan blazed its high beams and swerved hard toward them. Tires screeched, the car skidding across wet asphalt. Ryan yanked the wheel, the vehicle jolting before grinding to a stop. Ahead, 3 figures stepped out of the sedan, dark coats, swaggering menace. The leader squinted, voice dripping disdain. "Mr. Carter, better stick to fixing cars. This isn't your business." Ryan opened his door and stepped out, standing tall with the bearing of a soldier. He didn't blink. "Tell Victor this. If he lays another finger on those 3 girls, Sophie, Emily, Grace, I'll forget every lesson I ever learned about restraint." The leader froze for a beat, eyes flicking to the faint scar on Ryan's temple, to the cold steel in his gaze. Without a word, he jerked his chin. The men retreated to the sedan, engine roaring as the car vanished into the night. Claire stepped out, her face pale from the near collision. "You shouldn't provoke them." Ryan turned back, his voice low but unshaken. "They need to know one thing. I don't stay silent when my family is threatened. And this time, I'm not fighting alone." Claire looked at him, her eyes a mix of fear and newfound respect. "Then we keep going." That night, Ryan drove back to the garage in silence. Outside the window, the rain had cleared, and the sky was still streaked with gray clouds. He glanced in the rearview mirror, saw Claire clutching the thick folder tight, her face set in thought. In the back seat, Sophie had dozed off, her head tilted gently to the side. Ryan drew a deep breath. For the first time in years, he felt as though he had stepped back into who he once was, not just fighting to survive, but to protect. But this time, it wasn't for a flag or a country. It was for his daughter, and for the 2 other little girls who had pulled him into this war. He thought of Victor Hale, and he knew Judgment Day was coming. Morning in Brookhaven jolted me awake as if shaken by unseen hands. Every cafe had its TV on. Across the screen, a red banner scrolled. Breaking news. Victor Hale's face appeared, not in his usual air of power, but in a rushed photograph from an underground parking lot, his hand passing a briefcase to a man in a dark coat. Federal sources confirm Victor Hale is under investigation for money laundering, bribery, and embezzlement. Search warrants have been issued. Hale Enterprises' stock plummeted the moment the opening bell rang. The camera cut. Outside Hale Enterprises headquarters, employees crowded on the sidewalk, clutching cardboard boxes of personal belongings. On the stock exchange floor, boards blazed red like fire. The anchor's voice sped up, urgent, as if afraid the news would outrun her. In the garage, the drill fell silent midway. Ryan straightened, rag still in hand. The TV on the wall reflected part of his face, weary, tense, and then loosening. Nights of listening for strange sounds at the door. Dark-windowed cars idling too long at the curb. Anonymous calls. All of it surged back at once, then dissipated like smoke. The phone buzzed on the counter. Caller ID, Detective Morgan. Mr. Carter. Morgan's voice was steady but carried an unusual warmth. This is official! The arrest warrant is signed. FBI task forces are moving on all related sites. Hale's assets are frozen. You and Sophie are safe. Ryan leaned on the wooden counter. A hollow space opened in his chest, not of fear but release. He exhaled deeply, as though his lungs were filling fully for the first time in weeks. Thank you, he said. Not just for today. My part was small, Morgan replied. Yours and Claire's was the risk. Stay with your daughter. Today, the game ends. The call ended. The TV still crackled with reports. Sophie ran out from the back, clutching her purple sketchbook to her chest. She looked at the screen, Victor flanked by 2 agents in blue jackets, hands cuffed, hustled past a swarm of reporters. Daddy. Sophie's voice trembled, as though speaking louder might break the miracle. Is it over? Ryan dropped to his knees, level with her. He placed both hands on her shoulders, feeling her warmth and her breath. Sophie's eyes were clear, but beneath them lingered the shadow of fear that had clung too long. He nodded softly. It's over, sweetheart. No one will separate us again. Sophie threw her arms around his neck, her shoulders shaking, not with fear, but with the aftershocks of tension finally released. In that embrace, Ryan heard his own heartbeat slow, steady the rhythm of a home restored to peace. The news poured on. A map flashed, marking shell companies in Belize, then cut to a suburban warehouse where crates of records were sealed. A reporter stood live outside Victor's mansion. The FBI convoy has just left. Sources confirm several bribery contracts caught on tape have been seized. The phone buzzed again. This time, a text. Claire. The board confirmed stability. 2 investors returned. I'm safe. The girls want to see Sophie tonight. Ryan read, a faint smile tugging his lips. He glanced outside. No black SUVs squatting by the curb. Wind stirred the maple trees. Dry leaves spinning and landing like feathers on the road. The town wasn't exactly cheering, but it was as though a mountain had been lifted from its shoulders. He turned back to the TV. The footage of Victor replayed in slow motion. The man who once boasted of owning half the town, now ducked from cameras, eyes darting for escape. No mask left, no sneer, only the snap of handcuffs closing. Ryan reached for the remote, lowering the volume. He didn't want Sophie staring at that face anymore. Enough. The images were worth seeing. They had seen them. The truths worth knowing. They now knew. The rest could be left to law and time. Sophie returned to her table. She opened her sketchbook, drawing a great arc like an arm stretched to shield. Purple flowed across the page, then orange, then yellow. Ryan sat a few steps away, quietly watching. He thought of Morgan's words. Today, the game ends. Yet in his heart, he knew a new life was beginning with fewer threats, fewer anonymous calls, and more nights reading stories to his daughter. He stood, lifted the open sign at the door, and wiped away the dust of the past days. His fingers brushed the cord, and he remembered the nights slamming the garage door down at the sight of a strange car. The nights keep the lights burning. The mornings, jerking awake at the faintest sound. Those instincts would take time to fade, but he was ready. Peace, too, had to be relearned. He returned to the table. Sophie looked up, holding her still damp drawing. A man standing before 3 children. Behind him, a small garage, maple trees in the distance. What do you think, Dad? Ryan studied it for a long moment. I think we're still here, and the sun is up. The garage door opened. Sunlight slanted in, catching the faint scar on his temple. Ryan suddenly understood why he was so tired, and also why he hadn't collapsed. Because all this time, he had stood not just for Sophie, but for Emily and Grace too, for the belief that adults must be the wall when children need one. Outside, traffic hummed, voices carried, the world kept moving. Inside the garage, All was calm. Ryan typed a short reply to Claire. "Tonight, tell the girls Sophie is drawing." Then he set the phone down, picked up the old wrench that had been with him for years. That day, Victor's empire collapsed in a storm of headlines. But for Ryan and Sophie, it was the day they relearned how to breathe. And as the TV faded to a murmur, the single father understood. Some battles end with the snap of handcuffs, while the truest victories are silent, like the steady beat of his daughter's heart against his chest. Late in the afternoon, the last golden light stretched across the small street leading to the garage. After weeks wound tight as wire, today felt strangely calm. Ryan had just finished locking the rear wheel of a sedan when he heard a familiar engine. A glossy black SUV pulled up in front. The door opened. Claire stepped out, hair tied neatly, her forest green blazer giving her the usual sharp look, though this time her face had softened. Emily and Grace tumbled from the back seat, carrying large food boxes still steaming. The scent of roasted meat and fresh bread spread through the garage, washing away the long ingrained smell of oil. "We thought you and Sophie could use a proper dinner," Claire said, setting the boxes on the wooden counter. Her voice was no longer hesitant, but light, like a friendly invitation. Ryan smiled faintly, bowed his head in thanks. He called inside. "Sophie, come out here." The little girl peeked out, eyes lighting up at the sight of Emily and Grace. The twins ran over, grabbed her hands, and pulled her toward the table. Within minutes, the garage filled with the bright chatter of 3 children, laughter bubbling into spaces once heavy with silence. Emily pulled a brand new sketchbook from her backpack, its cover a shimmering violet. "For you," she said, pressing it into Sophie's hands, "so you can draw with us at school." Sophie hugged it close, eyes shining, whispering thanks. Grace carefully unfolded a large sheet of paper, a drawing of Ryan standing with arms spread wide, shielding the 3 girls. Across the top, written in firm, childlike strokes, "Our guardian." Ryan froze for a moment. His throat tightened as he stared at the clumsy lines filled with trust. He brushed the edge of the page, nodded slowly, his voice rough. "This means more than you know." Claire watched quietly as the 3 girls busied themselves with the food. She stepped closer to Ryan. "You didn't have to," she said, eyes still on the drawing. "But you did, and you stayed standing when things got dangerous." "That's rare." Ryan looked up at her. For the first time, he saw not just the steel of a CEO, but the gratitude and trust of a mother. His tired smile was steady. They deserved to be protected. In that moment, amid the smell of food and the scratch of crayons on paper, Ryan and Claire exchanged a look that carried more weight than 1,000 words. Not promises of the future, but acknowledgement. They had weathered a storm together, and what remained was not just safety, but a bond. Dinner began. The 3 girls ate and laughed, showing off their newest drawings, planning a summer picnic. Ryan looked around. Plastic cups, food boxes on the hood of an old car, faint music crackling from a radio. Everything was simple, yet richer than anything he'd ever had. Peace. As night settled outside, Ryan knew Victor Hale had vanished from their lives like a nightmare dissolved at dawn. But what lingered was more than the punishment of a villain. The deeper lesson was this: sometimes, protecting what's right means risking everything. And when we stand up, we not only hold on to justice, we sometimes find family in the most unexpected places. He glanced at Sophie, sitting shoulder to shoulder with Emily and Grace. The 3 bent over another new drawing. Her face no longer carried the timid fear of days past, but the carefree innocence of her age. Ryan swallowed against the tightness in his chest, knowing he had chosen rightly, no matter the cost. Across the table, Claire watched her daughters, too. She sighed softly, but it was a sigh of release. For the first time in months, she didn't have to think about Victor's next cruel move or plot boardroom strategies to keep the company safe. She simply saw an ordinary man, hands still smudged with grease, who had been brave enough to stand between children and the storm. And sometimes, it was that simple courage that saved entire little worlds. The meal ended in bursts of laughter. When Claire and the twins stood to leave, Emily turned back, whispering to Sophie, "Don't forget to bring the sketchbook to school tomorrow." Sophie nodded hard. as though sealing an important promise. Ryan walked them to the door. Claire paused, saying quietly, "I owe you more than thanks. But at least tonight, we can sleep without fearing the dream will be cut short." "As long as the kids are safe," Ryan replied, "that's enough." The SUV rolled away into the night. Ryan stepped back inside, saw the drawing still spread on the table with the words, "Our Guardian." He touched it gently, whispering to himself, "Maybe this is the greatest reward." In the silence, he realized, family isn't always blood, but the people who find each other when they're needed most. And sometimes, doing the right thing doesn't just save others. It saves you too. Maybe you've also witnessed or lived through a moment like Ryan, when someone stood to protect you, or when you had to be the strong one shielding those you love. Those moments may seem small, but they can change a life forever. If today's story touched you, leave a comment to share your own experience. Perhaps your words will become the encouragement someone else needs. And don't forget to hit subscribe to stay with us on this journey of human stories, where courage and love always find their way to shine.